And one of the concern I have when I'm researching on this information is like some of these stories get weaved into like conspiracy stories.
Yeah, sure.
So if someone doesn't have deep knowledge into this subject, how do you avoid those kind of pitfalls?
How does it?
Like because when at the beginning when I was researching and when I would get into that, it's kind of like throwing the baby with the bath.
Yeah.
So it's
how do we not? How does it not fall into conspiracy theory mindset essentially? Right. It's a very good question. So the way in which we do that is we do everything that we can to awaken consciousness to a more heart-centered, loving perspective. Because what happens is that if you give, you see an angry man on the street, for example, or an angry woman, whatever, an angry person on the street, and you give them this idea of extraterrestrial contact. From their negative experience and perspective of life, they actually are not vibrationally or energetically able to understand a more heart-centered picture. It's like there's a mechanical factor of consciousness that won't allow someone who's very angry and very negatively oriented to actually understand it from a different perspective. So if we can awaken these types of people to love, then immediately love translates into a higher state of awareness. And a higher state of awareness essentially means that we're more open to the infinite possibilities of the multiverse. So it always will come down to doing what we can, in my opinion. It comes down to doing what we can to awakening those up to love, to divine love and connection with one another, so that we can understand each other, so that I can sit down with someone who might not have this understanding and go, well, what do you think about this possibility? And they go, well, okay, maybe that is a possibility, and it might not necessarily be my experience, but I'm more open to it.
It's also a gateway.
It's a gateway, yeah.
Like, I was a conspiracy theorist, basically, at one point. Like, it starts there for a lot of people, and a lot of people who are in this spiritual community, so to speak, or whatever this culture is that's developing around these experiences, they all they have some aspect of being biased by the truth that's being hidden from everyone, and looking at that and realizing that things aren't what they seem, and then going from there. But as you said, like, people can get more attached to that stuff, and that leads to more into what he was saying. But at the end of the day, from what I've analyzed based off of where human culture is at and why there's so many different types of people imparting this information at so many different levels, so like really deep conspiracy stuff, really like Buddhist or Hinduism consciousness spiritual stuff, or like kind of sciencey metaphysical stuff. So there's all these little entry points, and there's like infinite gradients of these entry points of people to enter questioning their reality. And conspiracy theories are one of those things. Even though they're a little bit like iffy sometimes, it doesn't mean that they shouldn't be cherished for what they are, as they are a tool to reach certain mass groupings of the population, which they're not going to be able to absorb any other information but that at certain periods of time, as a gateway to then lead to different stages. So it has its function in this system of whatever's happening right now.
So I just want to add, actually, the beginning stages of my awakening when I was a teenager were very steeped in conspiracy theory, and I feel that for a large majority of people that are waking up to higher consciousness, it's sort of like this necessary stepping stone that everyone inevitably faces. Because when you hear about the government poisoning us and all the chemtrails and all this other stuff, you start to question what is real, what is reality, what is all this, and it sort of gives validity to those of us who have been feeling like things are not as they seem for our entire lives. It gives validity to that. I know for myself, when I got more into the conspiracy route, this was before more of like the more loving spiritual components came in, but as I got into the more conspiracy route, it's like, I knew it. I knew this was not as it seemed. And so it kind of gives validity to that. And then life kind of goes, okay, so you can see that there's more than meets the eye. That's an entry point for you at that state of consciousness. So as Shahram said, for the skeptical, sort of negative person, which I was very much like that when I was a teenager, that actually became an entry point. It was like, okay, based off of my consciousness at this point in time, I can understand this. So now that I can understand that there's more than meets the eye, life goes, but can you understand that it's even more than that? And it's like, okay, yeah. And then you just keep on riding that wave until, well, much of your understanding changes. So the conspiracy stuff can be a very powerful point in one's journey, just to see that things aren't always as they seem. Yeah.
That's a good way to put it. And if it's an entry point that could eventually lead you to oneness and love,
yeah,
why not?
Yeah, and why not? Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm.